Thank you everyone for being here and for joining us. We have a couple of announcements as everyone is logging in. First, I want to let you all know that you are able and allowed to turn your camera or your mics on if Mallory and Jonathan would like to engage with you. Please feel free to do so. We ask that you follow the lead of them. They will lead you through this. The next thing is that you have the ability to ask questions through Excel events. So to your top right corner, you will see a Q&A button. Feel free to send those questions over. Later on in the session, we will actually be able to have some questions answered. So feel free to send those over. So that is all the information that I have. It looks like we are ready to get started and people are still coming in. So we'll just welcome them as they come. I'm going to go ahead and hand it on over to Jonathan and Mallory.
Hi, welcome everybody. And Anthony, if you wouldn't mind pulling the slides up for us. Speaking on behalf of John and myself, I know that we are very honored and happy to present on this topic with all of you, and thankful for your interest in meeting the needs of food insecure members of your community. So I can't see, are our slides up already? Perfect. Anthony is on it. Thank you so much, Anthony. So the title of our presentation today is Web-Based Resources to Combat Food Insecurity. And specifically what we're going to be discussing with you is the development of web-based community food guides. The lessons that we've learned and considerations for developing one of your own. Again, my name's Malerie Goodman. I am representing End Child Hunger in Alabama, which is part of the Hunger Solutions Institute at Auburn University. John?
And I am John Chin. I am the founder and CEO of an organization named Share Meals. We use technology to address food insecurity. And I'm also the interim Chief Technology Officer for the New York City Food Policy Center at Hunter College.
Wonderful. Thanks, Anthony. Go ahead and head on over to the next slide. And we're going to open up today talking a little bit about the development of these community food guides, the necessity, how we got to where we are before we actually get into what they are and what they're intended to do. So John, go ahead.
Absolutely. So I know that, we've all have tried really, really hard to put the pandemic behind us. But if you all can indulge me to remember back to March 2020, when it first hit, New York City was hit pretty hard. Almost immediately, our unemployment rates quadrupled to 16%. The number of residents who were receiving food assistance doubled to 2 million residents. All the meanwhile, a third of our food pantries and soup kitchens closed. Those that were still open had to face these new social distancing rules, had to deal with a sharp drop in food pantry volunteers, had to adhere to public health mandates and change up their protocols, all of this pretty much overnight. And also our grocery stores in that first few months, they were starting to run out of things like fresh produce and childcare supplies. So all of these problems were just like boiling up in front of our eyes.
So meanwhile in Alabama, obviously Alabama has a very different history, a different demographic, and different needs than New York City. But we were seeing some problems come up as a result of the pandemic, of course. Alabama as a state is considered 97% rural land. And even though Alabama's most recent numbers of individuals living in poverty are about 16.8%, and that's higher than the state of New York, it's actually very similar to in percentage for the whole state as to New York City in general. So what do we know about what families do when they are experiencing food insecurity and are in crisis, and how they seek out resources? Well, from a 2019 report looking at 2018 data, nationwide, 1 in 10 individuals access charitable food resources. And as you can imagine, This information came before the pandemic. So while I don't have specific numbers as to how many individuals have accessed charitable food resources, I think we can suspect that it is marginally higher than that during the COVID pandemic. In addition, we know from some research that some people might not indicate formally that they're food insecure, or they may not even recognize themselves or understand that they meet the criteria of being considered food insecure. But we do know that when they're in crisis, they will self-select resources for themselves. And so when given a menu of options, we know that people in crisis will look for ways to meet their food insecurity needs. The demographics of individuals who access charitable food resources include individuals who are 18 to 34, women, single parents, Black and Hispanic adults, families in poverty. And what we mean by that is greater than 200% of the federal poverty level. We know that individuals who access charitable supports are experiencing other material hardships, such as housing insecurity or difficulty paying for utilities. And many of them are already accessing other public safety net programs. So we know that a large number of individuals who maybe didn't find themselves in that situation before the pandemic may have found themselves in that demographic during the pandemic. Anthony?
So this gave rise to a couple of important critical questions, namely, how do I find information about the food assistance programs that are still running? What do I do if I get conflicting information about their operating hours and or status, because those are so constantly changing? And more importantly, how can I how can I find the closest resources to me so I can minimize my exposure to others or access them quickly and affordably? Anthony, next slide. And so we came up with the solution to build these food guides. They are online digital resources that anybody can just go to, find either their zip code or their county or their neighborhood, and just pull up a master list of everything that's available to them. The three key things that we wanted to highlight with this project was, one, being amazingly comprehensive. So a lot of this data did exist in other places, but it was just so scattered that if you were in need, if you were in crisis, you didn't want to scramble over to all these different resources and try to make sense of it all. Instead, come to a food guide, come to a central location, and we've got easy to understand information for you. The second point was we made sure that we were updating this data frequently because it was critical, because it was important, because it was changing so rapidly. In New York City, at the height of the pandemic, we had anywhere from 80 to 100 volunteers calling up all of our resources daily, just checking to make sure that all the information was correct. And finally, we tried to maximize our impact while minimizing our cost. Like a lot of other organizations out there, the pandemic sort of sprung up overnight. And so we didn't really have a place in our annual budget for this. We weren't expecting to have to do this. And whatever budget we did have was, being strained away by all these other concerns. So we tried to make sure that everything that we're building made the best use of the limited funds that we had.
So John Chin already had a relationship with the Hunger Solutions Institute and kind of acted as a bridge when we went to him with concerns about making sure individuals had resources, access to information about resources during the pandemic throughout the state of Alabama. And he was already working with the Food Policy Center at Hunter College. And so that led to a collaborative effort and just a sharing of information as we both were creating these food guides that looked very different because they were addressing very different communities, but we're both trying to get the same thing, making sure that individuals had access to up-to-date and accurate information about food resources in their area. And as the pandemic has hopefully been slowing down and hopefully, I think we're all hoping, drawing to a close. What we have been trying to do is take what we've identified as best practices and commonalities between our two programs and create a toolkit so that other communities can replicate something of this nature. So I am a graduate research assistant at the Hunger Solutions Institute. I was pretty much one of the individuals who started putting this project together from the very beginning. And I've had my hand in a lot of different areas, from data management to people management, helping to get the word out about this project. And John has a little bit of a different role.
So I've been working with technology in the space of food security for almost 9 years now. And when I joined with the Food Policy Center, initially their plan to build these guides was to do it entirely manually, just like have people copy and paste from Excel sheets and everything. But I was able to come in, design architecture and infrastructure for that to vastly expand what's possible and to greatly reduce our dependency on people. And in seeing all that develop, I thought of our partners at HSI and I said, it's actually really easy to take a lot of what we've been doing and hand it to them, work with them, help them, and transform it into what they need, but essentially give them the core tools so they can do it on their own. So I've been seeing that ability to share.
So moving forward, we're going to be walking you through what our collaborative efforts between the Food Policy Center and the Hunger Solutions Institute have identified as 5 pillars of success, as well as where we plan to take this moving forward as we attempt to scale it out and make it accessible to other communities. John and I are going to be speaking from our own experience as we go through this. So you may hear just different perspectives, but we want to keep emphasizing that we are not handing out something that's going to be a cookie cutter that people can just set up and have it look exactly like ours in Alabama or his in New York City, but we want it to be customizable to the needs of your specific community. So without further ado, let's talk about those 5 pillars. Anthony, can you take us one more slide? Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and start talking about sponsoring organization capacity. And we've identified this as one of the elements that is incredibly important if you are interested in setting up something along these lines. I also do want to mention that I have placed the links for both the Food Policy Center's resource guide and the End Child Hunger in Alabama County Food Guide project in the chat if you're interested in kind of taking a look around while we're talking about this. So the sponsoring organization capacity is hugely important because this is the organization that's going to essentially be running the guide and setting up the resources that are necessary to make sure that it is sustainable. We have found that it's very important for this organization to be mission driven along the lines of something that's going to value food security, social justice, hunger, nutrition, public health. Again, I am speaking from the Hunger Solutions Institute, which is a research organization at Auburn University that attempts to find solutions and address issues related to local, statewide, nationwide, and international hunger. It is very important to have leadership that recognizes how crucial access to timely information is for individuals who are in crisis and who supports that effort. Our managing director was one of the individuals who saw the need for this and really spearheaded this project for us. In addition, you want to go beyond your organization and collaborate with stakeholders in your community who can also support it to get the word out, to provide you with volunteers or assistance with communication, and stakeholders could be higher ups in your organization. Again, we are part of a large university system, so we wanted to make sure that we had that support not only from the Institute, but also through the College of Human Sciences where we're housed. In addition, I mean, there's just going to be resources that are necessary to make this happen. John mentioned before, this needs to be low cost, high impact, and it is, but it's not no cost, right? So we at Hunger Solutions Institute have utilized interns as well as staff members to manage the project. That's essentially my role, as well as making sure that everything is running smoothly with a volunteer coordinator and someone who oversees technological aspects and data management, because this is, we have thousands of resources in our database, and we want to make sure that all of this information is accessible and accurate. Next slide, please. In addition, communications is going to be very important because this resource is only going to be helpful if people know it exists, right? And we're talking not only about families who are in need of food resources, but also the volunteers that are going to help make sure that the information available to them is accurate and detailed. Some of the ways that we've gone about that have been looking at public partnerships and how they can assist us. What already exists in your community or your state in our situation that has a shared priorities from a governmental standpoint. So for us, you know, partnering with stakeholders in the Department of Human Resources, public health, schools and universities were a huge source of communication about this resource. In Alabama, we're a rural community, so the agricultural and extension program is hugely important in our state, and they were essential in helping to get this project started and get information out. In addition, End Child Hunger in Alabama is a coalition of stakeholders in the public, private, and nonprofit areas. And so we made sure that they were aware of this project, that they were communicating with us about resources or how we may access food resources in their communities to add to our database. They could connect us with volunteers and just provide opportunities to get this information out to the public. And of course, we use direct marketing as well. We were strategic in how we targeted social media ads. We used mailers and made access to those available to our public and private and nonprofit partners so they could hand them out to others. We've been recognized at Auburn University. If you know anything about the state of Alabama, you know that football is very important here, and there's a lot of eyeballs on Auburn University games, so that's exposure for this project, as well as just swag. We have bags, we have pins, catered to the various voices we want to be part of this. Anthony? Perfect. People management is a huge part of this. And by people management, I'm really specifically talking about the volunteer aspect. We have had working for us over 100 volunteers updating the data, and that doesn't include staff or interns that we've had from the Hunger Solutions Institute. One has to take an active role in recruiting them. So identifying the needs of your project and a system to manage them and to recruit them is important from the get-go. It will need to be modified. You will reach hiccups, you will learn as you go along that things need to be changed and tweaked a little bit, but it's important to start out with a plan. It's an ongoing effort to manage the system effectively, and you have to get creative and think outside the box to make sure that that you are constantly recruiting and managing the people who are participating in this project. We found that it's helpful to target like-minded organizations, so other nonprofit organizations that are also interested in providing food resources for hungry families. A lot of times that's a great place to find volunteers or partners. Thorough training is very important. We want to make sure that all of our volunteers feel equipped to know exactly what's expected of them and to make sure that the data that they're putting in our database is as accurate as possible. We maintain open and frequent communication with them. And also we have looked for ways to automate that whenever possible. this is a lot of effort, a lot of time to manage over 100 volunteers. And so if there are any ways that you can find, and John has identified some really clever solutions to this, do it, because that's one less thing that you have to rely on manpower and just time to accomplish. We have found for us that it's very important to be flexible with our volunteers, to allow them to volunteer in a capacity that is interesting to them, that fits their schedule, that is accessible to them and helps them feel like they're doing something effective for their community. It is important to communicate that this is not just putting data in a database. This is essentially helping people who are losing hope, who do not have food, to find resources in their community. So we have found that that is essential to send that message home over and over again. And also just expressing gratitude. Again, we have swag. We have these beautiful bags that we give out to each volunteer with the logo from the Etcha County Food Guide project on it. So it's also free advertising, but also a way to thank our volunteers. And lastly, we have found it to be very helpful to create internship opportunities. That was hugely important when many in-person opportunities had shut down. But individuals, I think, now have just also found that a flexible remote option to complete internship hours through a university setting or a nonprofit setting has been very helpful. So we have worked collaboratively with various universities throughout the state of Alabama in helping interns learn about food security, learn about the needs in rural communities, learn about the needs throughout Alabama, while also doing something that is a huge service to their fellow Alabamians. John, I'll let you talk a little bit about the data and technology pieces.
Awesome, thank you. Anthony, if you can jump to the next slide. Wonderful. And so another key component to making these food guides incredibly successful is to make sure that our data is top notch. And we see data as coming from one of two places. Either it can come from sort of an untrusted source, and this might just be like a flyer that we find in the neighborhood that lists food pantries, or it might be from a website that no one really knows who runs it or who updates it or how, when it was last updated. And while these are valuable sources of information, because we can't verify them because we can't verify who's providing it, we have to sort of take on that burden of verifying it constantly. And so we do a one-time import of that. We take it and then we become the owners of it. But also because this project is so massive, we can't take everything on ourselves. And there are other organizations already in the space that have been doing this. And so where possible, we do want to build these collaborations and share data with these trusted partners. So here in New York City, there is Grow NYC, which is a city governmental organization that oversees about 1/3 of the food pantries in New York City. And they have data on operating hours, locations, all of that. And so we take their data. We also partnered with a nonprofit called Plentiful, and they have data on about another 1/3 of the food pantries in New York City. And so we're combining those two sources with our own. We're able to provide a comprehensive full view of all the food resources for residents. And so that's an ongoing collaboration. Of course, we need to make sure that the data that we're getting from untrusted sources is up to date and is constantly validated. And for that, we rely on volunteers. We rely on personnel to help with that. I talk a lot about the role of technology, but there's also this this risk of losing the tree for the forest, right? Like at the end of the day, we are getting food to people. We are solving a human need. and we don't want to completely take away that human connection. And our way to keep that in is to get volunteers to help with the data, get volunteers to help with outreach and promotion and all of that. But of course, people's times are limited, and because we have a limited budget, we're not able to retain a very, very large staff. So wherever we can, we want to develop automated tools to assist in any processes possible. So for example, we have some algorithms that do automatic data conflict resolution. So, we're pulling data from Grow NYC, from Plentiful, from our own volunteer calls, and sometimes that conflicts. But we have some smart scripts behind the scenes that handle all of that. Particularly in New York City, we have this huge need for translations. We have, I think, 8 million residents from all around the world. A lot of them are non-English speaking. And for us to get the guides into their hands in the best way possible, we want to do it in their primary language. And so we've developed a system to automatically translate pretty much all of our data on an as-needed basis. We also use it to automatically generate outreach materials. So currently the way that we're presenting it to the public is through a website, and all that website text and graphics and all that, that's automatically updated every night. So all we really have to care about is making sure the data is good. We are continuing to develop other outreach methods, like developing an SMS line, an automated voice call line, smartphone app, automatic PDF, flyer generation, all of that. And hopefully that scales up our ability to impact. And finally, we've also developed some automated tools to do regular backups. Primarily, that's in the case of an emergency, in case things blow up and we lose our servers, stuff like that. So that will enable us to get back online as quickly as possible. Thankfully, that has never happened. We've never needed that. But the secondary purpose is to use all this data, this historical data, for research. So many things are happening so fast in the pandemic that it's hard to look back and see all the changes that were happening day to day. Luckily for us, we can see that because we have these automated backups. Anthony, next slide. And then going along with data management is this important pillar of technology management. How do we actually get these tools up and running? How do we maintain them? How do we support them? Part of the solution for us has been to use off-the-shelf tools. So these are services that are already provided by organizations like Amazon, Google, Airtable, WordPress. We put up the guides pretty quickly, and the thing that enabled us to do that was to use these off-the-shelf tools. So we're able to save a lot of time in that respect. We have also found that sometimes these tools have limited functionalities. So a lot of times, like my team or the team at HSI have said, it would be great if we could do this. But then we look at the services that we're signed up for, and there's so many limitations. So that's a huge tension there. There's also financial and personnel constraints. Being able to afford these services, being able to negotiate nonprofit rates for them, and also getting personnel who are trained in these tools are all things that need to be considered. And we've run into a lot of obstacles as we've been doing that. Counter to those off-the-shelf tools, we found that it's sometimes easier to just build the tools in-house. The benefits of this is they are infinitely customizable. So anything that we need to do, we're able to just invest that time into coding out that tool and making it work. Another obvious benefit is that they're instantly shareable. So there have been a couple of tools that we've developed in New York City that I've gone to Malerie in an email and said, hey, you should use this. Here are the instructions on how to do that. And they've been able to do it just like pretty much without any technical knowledge whatsoever. And as we're looking at expanding these food guides and helping other communities launch them, we hope that to be the same experience. Any solutions that we build, we hope that we can share with you so you can launch them as well. We do realize that there are personnel constraints. Developing a tool from scratch is much different and much more demanding than using an off-the-shelf tool. But that's why we're forming a community. That's why we're mutually supporting each other and helping each other. Anthony, if you can go to the next slide. So we've talked a lot about where we have been and where we are right now, but what are our future plans? So I mentioned this a little bit. Our goal right now is to increase access to these guides. We have this amazing data, but we want to get it into the hands of everybody who can use it. So we are prototyping an automated SMS and voice hotline. Currently, you require an internet connection in order to access our guides. And we know that not every New Yorker or not every person in Alabama has that. So SMS and voice hotline are top on our list to build out. We're also integrating it into the Share Meals smartphone app. Share Meals deals primarily with colleges and universities. We deal with your college students, and getting information about food pantries into the hands of these students would actually also be incredibly impactful. So that's one of our next steps.
One of the things that we keep emphasizing is not reinventing the wheel, right? So looking into ways that we can collaborate with other individuals and organizations, whether they be public, whether they be nonprofit, that are already doing similar things. One of the issues in Alabama is not even necessarily if people can afford reliable access to internet, but there are places in Alabama where there is no internet infrastructure, right? And so having a web-based tool is very limiting for individuals who just cannot access the internet from their home. So we have been really trying to build relationships with organizations that have already developed that capacity to address basic needs, and perhaps have already gotten their name out there and are recognized not only by individuals in the state, but also by people who are helping those individuals access resources. So we are really trying to just develop partnerships with others who are like-minded, so that we don't end up with too much overlap of effort and cost.
Another thing that we are putting high on our priority list for the next few steps is to develop fine-tuned analytics. The pandemic really changed what people needed and the demographics of the people who needed food resources. And we were able to quickly pivot and to match that need. But as the pandemic changes, as the state of the United States and the world changes, the needs of our service population are also going to change. And we don't want to have to scramble and guess what that is. We don't want to wait until after the fact to be able to develop solutions. So we want to make sure that we have really fine-tuned analytics to see the change in needs and see the change in demographics as it's happening. I have a couple of ideas on how to do that, but I think that's like a longer, nerdier, more complicated talk that some of you may not be interested in, but that's definitely something that we're working on.
Well, and I just want to take a moment to say that John's expertise has been absolutely essential for us as we have built out our project. And again, it just keeps going to like, you know, finding like-minded individuals and working together to try to accomplish common goals, which, you know, is making sure that people in need have food. And, you know, right now, our goal is to be able to scale up and scale out this project and this model so that cities, counties, states can replicate it in a way that meets their needs, meets their level of resources, and also meets the needs of their community, right? So right now, the Food Policy Center and Hunger Solutions Institute, we are working together and we are trying to whittle down our two very different programs into like, what are the commonalities? What are best practices for people who are trying to set something up like this? And the nice thing is that whoever will be doing this will be benefiting from our hectic, chaotic, quick pivoting response to a pandemic. So, you know, hopefully no one will ever have to do that again. But we want you to be able to benefit from the experience that we got just from having to respond to a quickly changing environment. We want to put together all the information. You got a little bit of a sneak peek with what we talked about here in the 5 pillars, but how we want to walk you through, create a roadmap to essentially step through those 5 pillars and create something for yourself. And this includes not only just things to consider and directions for how to set up a volunteer management system or how to approach communications with something of this nature, but also we're looking at creating systems and coding and the things that you would need to actually get this up and running at low cost. In addition to that, we don't just want to hand out a toolkit to people and say, good luck, we hope that this meets your needs. We want to create a community of support, a coalition of like-minded individuals who see the need for a service of this nature and can come alongside each other to combine their skills and strengths and troubleshoot and make these food guides as impactful as possible to individuals who need it. So that's where we are right now. We're in the process of creating something that we hope will be guided by a needs assessment, like a self-needs assessment. What do you have already in your organization? What do you need to develop to create something of this nature? And then creating this toolkit in an accessible web-based format. And Anthony, if you'll take it to the next slide. So we've included here our direct contact information for both John and myself, as well as the links to the food guides. I hope you have had an opportunity to click those links that we dropped in the chat and take a look at what they look like. And also just notice that these are 2 food guides for 2 very different areas, and they look very different. They're organized in very different ways because we had different people and different volunteer needs. And it can be that way for any other state or community that wants to implement this. We are in the process of developing a toolkit, and you know, we've dropped a QR code here that you can scan and click and fill out a brief Qualtrics form to kind of just be part of this conversation and know what's going on with the development and know when we're ready with something to say, here you go, here's the beginning steps for getting something like this set up for yourself. We promise we are not going to spam your email inbox with all the endeavors, but we just want to start building that community of individuals who see the need and the purpose of a resource of this nature. John, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nothing on my end. I think you've summed up everything pretty well.
Great. Well, we would love to open up this portion of the presentation to dialogue and Q&A. We did have a couple questions that were dropped in the Q&A thing that I'm happy to answer here. I did respond to one already. But please feel free to just, turn on your camera or unmute yourself to ask any questions you might have about setting up something or just our experience in getting this going. But to kick off the Q&A session, I did want to address the questions that were already dropped into the Q&A, and John, give you an opportunity to address them as well. So the one that was there was, I would love to know if you found a similar model that is state or government led. Collaboration is key, but I recognize that who leads the effort may change how the effort progresses and how the information is obtained and maintained. And so, my response to that, and John, feel free to chime in, is that we are not actually aware. We haven't identified any other models that are as comprehensive and are as consistently updated. So, with the interest of accuracy of data, we have not found models that are similar, or else I would have gone to them and say, tell me how to do this. But you are right. You're absolutely right. And I think that your comment speaks to just the importance of the self-assessment that we're using to guide this toolkit. Because we don't want people to necessarily sign up to be the state sponsoring organization of this project and then realize 6 months in that they're ill-equipped and it's not something that they want to commit to, right? We want people to know exactly what they're going to need to make something of this nature happen and commit to that. So, that is a very good point about who's leading it and how it's going to develop moving forward.
I will also add that there is also space for local and state governments to take a part of this, to be a part of this food guide. Very early on in New York City, when we were offering free meals for school kids, and we were also doing food hubs. That was very much a New York City governmental program, and we collaborated with them. So we pulled in their data, we made that available on our guides, and we also made our guides available to whomever those agencies were able to get, their clients, their service population. And we're also currently in talks with some other city organizations about expanding there. So while I don't know exactly about any models for state government-led initiatives, I have seen them being active partners in nonprofit-led models.
Thank you for that.
Oh, sorry, and I was on mute. But as always, I feel like I've said that a million times in the past year. Sorry, I was on mute. But so the next question that comes from that is, well, how much is this going to cost, right? And so that's going to vary. It doesn't have to be. This model doesn't necessarily have to be run by volunteers. Right? It could be that this becomes an assigned task to a member of, a public bureaucratic office, right? It's your job to maintain this list of resources. So it very well could be something that would be government-led. But just to give you an idea of kind of what we're working with, we do have the resources of a university-based research institute, right? Albeit a small one. We have a very small staff, but I would say at the height of the pandemic, at the height of developing this resource, I committed some hours of my research assistantship I work part-time. We had some interns who were working as the volunteer coordinator and the data coordinator. Currently, it's me and one other individual working 10 hours a week to manage both the volunteer and data aspects. So we were very fortunate to have the generous support of Airtable. Airtable, you may have heard us mention that. It's a cloud-based Excel spreadsheet that can do magic, right? And then with John's help, it automatically populates onto our website when it's updated in real time. And so they were very generous. We reached out to them. They provided in-kind grants essentially during the coronavirus pandemic, the beginning of it, for nonprofit organizations in the hunger space to use it to address those needs. So that could also be, as John mentioned earlier, a potential cost. But again, we're working on that in the development of our toolkit to try to develop tools that are more accessible to organizations that are starting projects of this nature.
I'd also just like to underscore something that Malerie had said is it really depends on your community. It depends on your details. The size of the database and the number of hours it would require to keep that updated depends on, if you're in New York City, if you're Alabama, if you're San Francisco, if you're, it depends on the size of your service population.
So Kate, how in the comments in the Q&A mentioned that in Indianapolis, they have something similar. And Kate, if you would be comfortable talking about that, I would love to hear more about what that looks like or how it's maintained.
Sure. We've been working on this for 5 years now and released it just before the pandemic in February 2020. So the timing worked out really well. And we work with a local developer here who does all the programming for us because that is not a skill that anyone on our staff has. And we've gotten, we already work closely with the food pantries and meal sites and other providers in our county, Marion County, Indiana. And we've started, because of the success locally here in Indianapolis, we've started expanding. So actually by the end of this year, it'll be statewide. But the data collection and management, making sure it's up to date, is a continuing challenge. And it sounds like we're doing something similar to you and using trusted partners from around the state who are very familiar with the resources in their area to help us keep the information updated, because the tool is only as good as the information it contains.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And so, Kate, you would be a perfect addition to this coalition of individuals who are doing something of this nature, but are learning as they go and want to lend support and expertise and experience to the conversation. So that's wonderful. And this is a great opportunity for us to hear about things going on like this, because, we don't want to reinvent the wheel.
But I'll send you an email to connect.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's, when we were talking about using trusted partners, one of the groups that we've really relied on in the state of Alabama has been our SNAP educators through the Alabama Extension. We have a SNAP educator overseeing 1 to 2 counties typically, depending on the population. And there's 67 counties in Alabama. And so they have really been a huge resource, not only in helping to populate the database, but also in maintaining it, because they already have established some of those relationships with stakeholders in their own community. And it's just been really great to see people take ownership. We call them we have a little bit of a different volunteer model than they do at the Food Policy Center. But we call our volunteers county ambassadors because we organize by county. And so we've really tried to convey it as like like an esteemed position. Like you're not a volunteer, you are an ambassador for your county to make sure that their food needs are being met. And you are becoming the expert on what is available to people in need. And that speaks to not only the volunteer, like the people management aspect, but also the communications, right? Because we want people to know, again, that it's not just, you're not just putting data in a Excel spreadsheet. You are helping people get access to the food that they need on one of their worst days. So, but thank you so much, Kate, for sharing about that. And we would love to, like, if anybody else knows of anything similar or would like to talk about what you're doing, that's certainly, that would certainly be a wonderful part of this conversation. About 9 minutes left for questions if anybody has one.
I was just going to add, so I've been peppering you guys with questions. I'm the Senior Hunger Nutrition Coordinator in the state of Georgia, in state government. And this session is very timely because just yesterday we have a Senate committee on food access and ending food access, ending food deserts in the state. And they put out their recommendations yesterday. And the first recommendation was for a state agency, they didn't name the one, to actually host a site for food resources. So of course, I'm kind of new as far as understanding legislation, but they put the recommendation out there in front of, legislation for 2022, and I don't know what that looks like. So I was just curious. We're kind of, I guess, similar to other states in the sense that some of the key food supporting agencies may be in different state agencies, but like I'm in the Department of Human Services, but we have SNAP, we have WIC, we have all of our Older American Act services, all within DHS. So we might say, hey, we're good, but what about Department of Ag or something? So that's what I was wondering about that.
And what state? What state are you in?
Georgia.
Georgia. Oh, hello. You're right next to us.
Right.
Well, that's really fortunate because if you shoot me an email, I'm happy to reach out. We, the Hunger Solutions Institute is aware of and has a lot of connections nationwide addressing hunger. And so there might be an organization or a group that has similar interests or that is kind of acting as a hub to meet food needs, such as like End Child Hunger in Alabama, right? I'm not aware of it for Georgia, but that doesn't mean that we can't find out for you in a relatively quick manner. So if you send me an email, and again, it's on the slides that I think are attached somewhere in here, Anthony, you might be able to provide a little bit more clarification. I'm actually going to just drop in the chat as well. But shoot me an email with your contact information and I'll see if I can get that to you.
Okay. Thank you.
We do include senior nutrition resources on our website, but again, it was even something of that nature was just very hard. We had to go to each region when we were originally populating our database and pull that information about where food was accessible. And so, and that's part of why we started this project, right? Because we wanted to put in that legwork so that people who were in crisis didn't have to.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I also just want to jump in. Your experience with these gaps in communication between all these different offices, we've seen that as well, and we've tried to help bridge those gaps and develop tools to automatically integrate data. So when we're doing our work in New York City, I think we're talking with the Department of Health for their food distribution. We're combining that with data from Grow NYC about food, farmers markets and food pantries. the easiest way to get all those partners to happily work together is to look at their existing workflows, look at their existing methodology, and try to insert like automated tools that connect everything. So for them, nothing changes, but all of a sudden everything is flowing together and is working together. And so we'd love to help you do that if you need that.
Yeah, and just a reminder, if you scan that QR code or you send us an email to be part of this, just part of this discussion and part of what we're developing here, that's not a commitment. I promise you we will not we'll not hunt you down and make sure that you establish a food resource guide. But if there's any interest at all, or you think that there might be room for this in your community, even if you're not the one to make it happen, please join us in this conversation as we move forward, because we want to get word out about this and have as much communication and knowledge sharing as possible. We've got about 4 minutes, so if anybody has any more questions. All right, well, it looks like our Q&A is wrapping up. So Anthony, I don't know if it's okay if we release everyone to prep for their next session.
Yeah, we can totally go ahead and prep for the next
Wonderful.
one. So I want to really quickly though, thank you both for being here, for speaking with us with such passion about this important topic. And thank you.
Yeah.
Up next is our speed network session. So we want to have you all engage in several sessions where you can meet your fellow summit attendees in small groups. In between sessions, we will hear inspirational poems by Poetry X Hunger Collective.
Yeah.
To join that session, click networking in your navigation bar to the left of your screen just before they begin. That concludes our workshop. So again, thank you both for being here and everyone for attending. To exit this session, please click on the red phone icon at the bottom right corner of your screen now, and then click leave. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you guys. It was nice to speak about this with you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.